A millionaire inherited a resort from his father and disguised himself as a janitor to test the employees. He was horrified when he heard the manager say something. The sun was setting over the crystal-clear waters of the Florida Keys, painting the sky in golden and reddish hues. The waves gently broke against the shore, creating a natural symphony that usually calmed Jason Blackwood. However, this evening, not even the beauty of the sunset could quell the storm raging inside him. Jason, a 28-year-old man, tall and athletic, stood on the balcony of the presidential suite at the Blue Paradise Resort. His hazel eyes, usually sparkling and full of life, now reflected a mixture of pain and confusion. His brown hair, typically perfectly styled, was disheveled from the countless times he had run his fingers through it in the last few hours. He wore an impeccable black suit, but his tie was loose and the top buttons of his white shirt were undone. In his right hand, he held a barely touched glass of whiskey. The news he had received that morning had changed his life forever. William Blackwood, his father and tourism magnate, had suddenly passed away from a heart attack. The sound of the door opening snapped Jason out of his thoughts. He turned to see Sarah, his mother, enter the room. Despite the evident sadness on her face, Sarah maintained the elegance and poise that characterized her. Her black hair, sprinkled with some gray, was pulled back in an impeccable bun, and her black designer dress accentuated her slender figure. "Jason, darling," Sarah said softly, approaching her son. "The reading of the will is in an hour. You should get ready." Jason nodded mechanically, taking a sip of his whiskey before setting the glass on the nearest table. "I still can't believe he's gone, Mum," he murmured. His voice broken by contained emotion, Sarah approached and hugged him, allowing herself for a moment to show her own vulnerability. "I know, my love, I can't believe it either. Your father was a strong man. Full of life. I never thought he'd leave us so soon." They separated after a moment, and Sarah took her son's face in her hands, looking directly into his eyes. "But now we must be strong, Jason. Your father built an empire, and now it's up to us to maintain his legacy." Jason felt a knot in his stomach at his mother's words. He knew this moment would eventually come, but he had always thought he'd have more time, that his father would be there to guide him. Now suddenly all the weight of family expectations fell on his shoulders. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, Mom," he confessed, moving away and walking back to the balcony. "Dad always wanted me to get more involved in the business, but I always found excuses not to do it." Sarah followed her son, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Your father understood that you needed your own space, Jason. He never pressured you too much because he trusted that when the time came, you'd rise to the occasion." Jason turned to look at his mother, doubt clearly visible in his eyes. "What if I'm not? What if I can't handle all this?" "You will be," Sarah affirmed with conviction. "You're a Blackwood, Jason. You have your father's entrepreneurial spirit in your blood. You may not have been directly involved in the business until now, but you've grown up surrounded by it. You know this world better than you think." Before Jason could respond, a knock on the door interrupted the conversation. It was Linda, the family's personal assistant, a middle-aged woman with thin-rimmed glasses and a grey pantsuit. "Excuse the interruption," Linda said in a professional tone. "The family lawyer has arrived and is ready to proceed with the reading of the will when you are—" Sarah nodded. "Thank you, Linda. We'll be there in a few minutes." When Linda withdrew, Sarah turned to her son once more. "It's time, Jason. I know it's difficult, but we must face this together. Your father would want us to be strong." Jason took a deep breath, straightened his tie and buttoned his shirt. "You're right, Mom. Let's do this." Together, mother and son left the suite and headed towards the resort's boardroom, where the fate of the Blackwood Empire was about to be revealed. The boardroom was an imposing space, with a large mahogany table in the center and black leather chairs around it. The walls were adorned with photographs showing the history of the Blue Paradise Resort, from its inauguration 3 decades ago to its most recent expansions. In each image, the figure of William Blackwood stood out, his confident smile and visionary gaze captured for posterity. Jason couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt as he looked at these images. While his father had been building this empire, he had been more concerned with enjoying the fruits of that work than with learning how to maintain and grow it. Already seated around the table were several key figures in the Blackwoods' life and business. There was Mark Thompson, the resort's general manager, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a shrewd look behind his designer glasses. Next to him, Emily Rodriguez, the head of personnel, a woman in her 40s with brown hair tied back in a bun and warm eyes that reflected a deep sadness for William's loss. Also present was Robert Davis, the head accountant, a short and plump man with incipient baldness and fingers that wouldn't stop fiddling with his tie. And finally, at the head of the table, was George Sullivan, the Blackwood family lawyer, a man in his 60s with white hair and a serious expression. When Jason and Sarah entered the room, everyone stood up out of respect. There was an exchange of silent greetings, handshakes, and brief hugs. The atmosphere was solemn, filled with contained emotions and unexpressed expectations. Once everyone was seated, Lawyer Sullivan cleared his throat and began to speak. "We are gathered here for the reading of Mr. William Blackwood's will," he announced in a grave voice. "Before proceeding, I would like to express my sincerest condolences to the family and all present. William was not only my client for over 30 years, but also a close friend. His loss is a blow to all of us." He paused, allowing his words to settle before continuing. "Now I will proceed with the reading of the will." Sullivan took out a sealed envelope from his briefcase and carefully opened it. He extracted several documents and began to read. "I, William Blackwood, of sound mind, declare this to be my last will and testament." Jason listened with a mixture of anxiety and fear. Although he had always known he would inherit the family business someday, the reality of that moment hit him hard. His gaze briefly met Emily's, who offered him a comforting smile. He had always appreciated Emily's warmth, who had been almost like a second mother to him during his upbringing. "And it is my wish that my only son, Jason Blackwood, inherit the totality of my shares and properties, including but not limited to the Blue Paradise Resort and all its extensions and associated properties." A murmur ran through the room. Although everyone expected this decision, hearing it out loud made it real and definitive. Jason felt the weight on his shoulders multiply. He saw Mark Thompson raise an eyebrow, his expression indecipherable. "However," the lawyer continued, and everyone in the room tensed at this word, "this inheritance is subject to a condition." Jason straightened in his chair, his heart beating fast. A condition? His father had never mentioned anything about this to him. To take full possession of the inheritance and assume total control of the Blue Paradise Resort, Jason must work in every department of the resort for a period of 6 months, starting from the lowest position in each area. During this time, he must use a false name and not reveal his true identity to anyone outside this room. The silence that followed. These words was deafening. Jason looked around, seeing the surprise reflected on the faces of everyone present. His mother, Sarah, seemed as surprised as he was. "If Jason successfully completes this 6-month period," Sullivan continued, "he will assume full control of the resort and all associated properties. If he chooses not to comply with this condition, or if he reveals his identity before time, ownership of the resort will pass to a board of directors composed of the current department heads, and Jason will only receive a monthly allowance." Jason was speechless. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. His father, even after his death, was still challenging him, pushing him to get involved in the business in a way he had never imagined. "Dad," he muttered to himself, a mixture of frustration and admiration in his voice. Lawyer Sullivan continued reading some minor provisions of the will, but Jason barely listened. His mind was trying to process what this condition meant. He would have to abandon his life of luxury, his identity, everything he knew, to completely immerse himself in the workings of the resort from the most basic level. When Sullivan finished reading, the room was silent for a few moments. It was Sarah who spoke first. "George," she said, addressing the lawyer, "were you aware of this condition?" Sullivan shook his head. "William gave me this sealed envelope a few months ago, with strict instructions not to open it until this moment. I'm as surprised as all of you." Mark Thompson cleared his throat. "If I may," he said, his voice soft but firm, "I believe Mr. Blackwood has once again demonstrated his genius. This condition will ensure that the future leader of the resort knows its operation thoroughly. Emily nodded, adding, "Plus, it will give Jason the opportunity to really get to know our staff and understand their needs and challenges." Jason listened to these comments in silence, his mind still trying to process the situation. Finally, he stood up, all eyes turning to him. He began, his voice shaky at first, but gaining firmness as he spoke. "I accept my father's condition. I know I haven't been as involved in the business as I should have been, but I'm willing to learn, to work hard, and to honor my father's legacy." Sarah took her son's hand, her eyes shining with pride and concern in equal measure. "Jason, are you sure? 6 months is a long time, and you'll have to give up everything you know." Jason nodded, a new determination shining in his eyes. "I'm sure Mom-Dad always wanted me to truly understand the business, and now I see why it's time for me to take on my responsibility, lawyer." Sullivan stood up. "Very well then. According to William's instructions, the 6-month period will begin in a week. During this time, Jason, you must prepare for your new identity. The rest of you," he said, looking at Mark, Emily, and Robert, "must keep the secret of Jason's true identity. Is that clear?" Everyone nodded solemnly. "Excellent," Sullivan continued. "Now, there are some additional details we need to discuss." As the lawyer continued to talk about the legal and logistical aspects of the situation, Jason allowed himself a moment to reflect. His life was about to change drastically. He would go from being the playboy heir to a simple maintenance employee. The idea both terrified and excited him in equal measure. He looked at the photos of his father on the walls, the smiling and confident face of William Blackwood. For the first time in a long time, Jason felt he truly understood his father. This final challenge was William's ultimate gift, the opportunity for Jason to prove himself, not just to others, but to himself. "I'll make you proud, Dad," Jason thought, a new determination burning inside him. The following days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Jason had to prepare for his new life as Jack, the name he had chosen for his alter ego. With the help of Emily, who had offered to oversee his transformation, Jason began to plan the details of his new identity. One afternoon, while reviewing the final details in Emily's office, Jason couldn't help but express his doubts. "Emily, do you think I can really do this? Do you think I can fool everyone and live as a common employee for 6 months?" Emily, who was reviewing some documents, looked up and gave him a warm smile. "Jason, I've watched you grow up. I know you have a good heart, and that you're more capable than you think. Your father wouldn't have proposed this challenge if he didn't believe you could overcome it." Jason nodded, grateful for the support. "Thank you, Emily. I don't know what I'd do without you. You've always been there for me, even when I was a spoiled brat." Emily laughed softly. "Oh, you had your moments, but I always knew there was a good man underneath all that rich kid facade." Her expression turned more serious. "Jason, there's something I need to tell you. Your father, he and I were very close. He wasn't just my boss, but also a dear friend." Jason looked at her curiously. He had always noticed that his father had a special respect for Emily, but he had never thought much about it. Emily continued, "William confided many things about the resort to me, about his plans for the future. He wanted me to guide you through this process, but without interfering too much. He wanted you to discover things for yourself." "What do you mean?" Jason asked, intrigued. Emily sighed deeply. "Just that there's more to this resort than meets the eye, Jason. Your father built something special here, something that goes beyond a simple business. I hope that during these 6 months you can discover what Blue Paradise really means." Before Jason could ask more, the office door burst open. Mark Thompson entered, his face a mask of barely contained irritation. "Emily, I need to talk to you about the new vendor contracts," Mark said, deliberately ignoring Jason. Emily stood up, her expression changing to one of professionalism. "Of course, Mark. Jason, do you mind if we continue this later?" Jason nodded, noticing the tension in the air. As he headed for the door, he couldn't help but notice the cold look Mark gave him. He had always felt that the general manager didn't appreciate him much, but now that antipathy seemed to have increased. As he left the office, Jason came face to face with Robert, the head accountant, who seemed about to knock on the door. "Oh, Jason," Robert said, clearly surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I was just finalizing some details with Emily," Jason responded, noticing the nervousness in Robert's voice. Right, Robert muttered, passing by Jason to enter the office. "If you'll excuse me." Jason stood in the hallway, reflecting on the events of the past few days. There were tensions and secrets at the resort that he had never noticed before. What else would he discover during his time as Jack? The morning Jason was to begin his new life as Jack came too soon for his liking. He woke up before dawn, his stomach churning with a mixture of nerves and anticipation. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the man staring back at him. His hair, once perfectly styled, was now longer and messy. A several-day-old beard partially covered his distinctive features. The designer clothes had been replaced by worn jeans and a simple t-shirt. "Good morning, Jack," he muttered to himself, practicing the deeper tone of voice he would use for the next 6 months. A soft knock on the door snapped him out of his thoughts. It was his mother, Sarah, who entered with a worried expression on her face. "Are you ready, honey?" she asked, her voice tinged with emotion. Jason nodded, unable to find the right words. Sarah approached and hugged him tightly. "Remember, no matter what happens, I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Your father would be too." Jason allowed himself a moment of vulnerability in his mother's arms before pulling away and grabbing his backpack. "It's time," he said, his voice firmer than he felt. Together, mother and son left the presidential suite for the last time in the next 6 months. They walked in silence through the resort's corridors, still deserted at this early hour upon reaching the service entrance, where Emily was waiting for them. Sarah hugged her son one more time. "Take care of yourself, my love," she said, with tears in her eyes. "And remember, if at any point you feel you can't go on, you can always quit. Your well-being is more important than any inheritance." Jason nodded, grateful for his mother's unconditional support. "I will, Mom, I love you." With one last hug, Jason separated from his mother and approached Emily, who was waiting for him with a determined expression on her face. "Ready, Jack?" Emily asked, using his new name to help him get into character. Jason, "No, Jack," nodded. "Ready." Emily handed him a maintenance uniform and an ID card. "Welcome to Blue Paradise Resort. Jack, your shift starts in 15 minutes. Martin, the head of maintenance, will be waiting for you in the supply room." Jack took the uniform and card, feeling the weight of his new reality. With one last look at his mother, who was watching from a distance, he entered through the service door, leaving behind his life of luxury and privilege. The service hallway was a completely different world from the resort Jack knew. The walls, instead of the luxurious wallpaper that adorned the guest areas, were painted a simple and functional beige color. The floor was polished concrete, far from the Persian rugs and marble floors he was accustomed to. As he walked towards the supply room, Jack crossed paths with several employees starting their shifts. Some looked at him curiously, others barely paid him attention, immersed in their own morning routines. For the first time in his life, Jack experienced what it was like to be completely anonymous, just another face in the crowd. Upon reaching the supply room, he met Martin, a robust man in his 50s with a thick mustache and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. "You must be the new guy, Jack," Martin said, evaluating him with a critical look. "I hope you're ready to work hard. We don't tolerate slackers here." Jack nodded, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. "Yes, sir. I'm ready to learn and work hard," Martin grunted, apparently satisfied with the response. "Good. Put on the uniform and follow me. We have a lot to do before the guests wake up." As he changed in the small dressing room adjacent to the supply room, Jack couldn't help but think about how surreal the whole situation was. Just a week ago, he was the heir to the resort, living a life of luxury and comfort. Now, he was about to start his first day as a maintenance employee, preparing to clean bathrooms and fix leaky faucets. As he left the dressing room, he saw his reflection in a small mirror hanging on the wall. The dark blue uniform of the maintenance staff was a bit big on him, making him look younger and less sure of himself. For a moment, he felt a pang of panic. Could he really do this for 6 months? "Jack, move it!" Martin's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. The toilets aren't going to clean themselves. Jack took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and followed Martin out of the supply room. His new life had officially begun. The first hours of his shift were a whirlwind of activity. Martin took him from one side of the resort to the other, showing him the basic tasks he was expected to perform: cleaning bathrooms, changing burnt-out light bulbs, picking up trash from the gardens, and a dozen other tasks that Jack had never considered before. To his surprise, Jack discovered that the physical work had a calming effect on his restless mind. Focusing on scrubbing a toilet or raking fallen leaves prevented him from obsessing over his situation or worrying about the future. However, the reality of his new position hit him hard when, while cleaning the main pool bathroom, a guest entered and began using the urinal without even looking at him. Jack, who had always been the center of attention wherever he went, suddenly felt invisible. Mid-morning, during a brief break, Jack found himself in the staff cafeteria, surrounded by employees chatting and laughing, completely unaware of his true identity. He sat alone in a corner, observing and listening, trying to absorb everything he could about this new world. It was then that he noticed a young woman sitting a few tables away. She had dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and wore the uniform of the resort's waitresses. What caught Jack's attention was the intensity with which the young woman was studying a thick book in front of her, completely ignoring the lively conversation around her. Intrigued, Jack got up to throw the remains of his coffee in the trash can near the young woman's table. As he passed by her, he glanced at the book. It was an advanced accounting text. "Interesting reading for the break," Jack commented before he could stop himself. The young woman looked up, surprised. For a moment. Jack feared he had made a mistake in speaking to her, but then she smiled, a warm smile that lit up her entire face. "I'm studying for my exams," she explained. "I work here to pay for college." Jack nodded, impressed by her dedication. "I'm Jack," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "Today is my first day in maintenance." "Olivia," she responded, shaking his hand. "Waitress and part-time accounting student, welcome to Blue Paradise, Jack." Before they could continue their conversation, Martin's voice resonated in the cafeteria. "Jack, break's over. We have a leak in Suite 305. Jack quickly said goodbye to Olivia and ran towards Martin, but he couldn't help looking back one more time. Olivia had already returned to her book, but there was something about her that had caught his interest. As he followed Martin to Suite 305, Jack reflected on his morning. It had been exhausting, confusing, and in many ways humbling, but it had also been revealing. In just a few hours, he had seen more of the inner workings of the resort than in his entire previous life. And as he prepared to face his next challenge, a leaky pipe and an angry guest, Jack realized that maybe, just maybe, his father had known exactly what he was doing by giving him this test. Perhaps these 6 months wouldn't just be an obstacle to overcome, but an opportunity to grow and learn. With that thought in mind, Jack picked up his toolbox and entered Suite 305, ready to face whatever fate and capricious pipes had in store for him. As the days passed, Jack began to adapt to his new routine. He would wake up before dawn, put on his maintenance uniform, and immerse himself in a world of hard work and constant challenges. Each day brought new tasks and problems to solve, from broken air conditioners to difficult guests. One morning, while repairing a broken lounge chair by the main pool, Jack noticed Mark Thompson, the general manager, speaking heatedly with a man he didn't recognize. Both were far enough away that Jack couldn't hear their conversation, but Mark's body language indicated he was upset. Intrigued, Jack tried to move closer discreetly, pretending to pick up some fallen leaves. It was then that he caught fragments of the conversation. "You can't keep raising the prices," the unknown man was saying. "Our agreement was clear. Things have changed. Mark responded in a low but firm voice. "With William's death, we need—" At that moment, Mark noticed Jack's presence and abruptly stopped talking. He gave Jack a withering look before leading the man to a more private location. Jack remained thoughtful. What kind of deals was Mark making, and why had his father's death changed things? He made a mental note to pay more attention to Mark's activities in the future. As he finished repairing the lounge chair, Jack saw Olivia walking along the edge of the pool, carrying a tray with drinks for the guests. He noticed how she moved with grace and efficiency, smiling and chatting with the clients as she served their cocktails. However, he could also see the tiredness in her eyes, the slight trembling in her hands after hours of carrying heavy trays. Impulsively, Jack approached her when she finished serving the drinks. "Hi, Olivia," he greeted her with a smile. "Looks like you've had a busy morning." Olivia turned, surprised at first, but then returned his smile. "Oh, hi, Jack. Yes, it's been crazy. The heat makes everyone want to drink more than usual." "I can imagine." Jack nodded. Then, without thinking too much, he added, "Hey, what do you say we grab a coffee together during the break? Well, if you have time to rest, of course." Olivia seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then her smile widened. "You know what, that sounds great. I could use a break and some company that isn't asking me for another piña colada." They both laughed and agreed to meet in the staff cafeteria during their next break. The rest of the morning flew by for Jack. He repaired leaky faucets, changed burnt-out light bulbs, and even had to deal with a family of raccoons that had decided to make their home in one of the resort's dumpsters. Each task presented a new challenge, and Jack found himself enjoying the sense of accomplishment that came with solving practical problems. When it was finally time for his break, Jack headed to the staff cafeteria with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. He found Olivia already seated at a table in the corner, with 2 cups of coffee in front of her. "I hope you like black coffee," Olivia said when Jack sat down. "I didn't know how you take it, but I thought that after a morning of hard work you'd need something strong." Jack took the cup, grateful. "Black coffee is perfect, thank you, and you're right. I definitely need it." There was a moment of silence as they both took a sip of their coffees. Then Olivia spoke. "So Jack, what brings you to Blue Paradise? You don't seem like the typical maintenance guy, no offense." Jack almost choked on his coffee. For a moment he feared his disguise wasn't as good as he thought, but then he realized that Olivia was just making a casual observation. "Well," he began, choosing his words carefully, "let's say I'm at a point of change in my life. I needed a fresh start, and this job seemed like a good opportunity to learn new things." Olivia nodded, understanding. "I get it. I'm here looking for a new beginning too. In a way, this job allows me to study and save for college someday. I hope to be an accountant and be able to help my family." Jack felt moved by Olivia's determination. "It's admirable that you work so hard for your dreams," he said sincerely. "How did you end up interested in accounting?" Olivia's eyes lit up. "I've always been fascinated by numbers and how they can tell the story of a business. Plus, I grew up watching my father struggle with the finances of his small store. I want to be able to help people like him, small business owners who have big dreams but need help managing the financial side." As Olivia spoke, Jack couldn't help but feel impressed by her passion and vision. He also felt a pang of guilt as he thought about how he had taken his wealth and position for granted for so long. "It's a wonderful goal," Jack said. "I'm sure you'll achieve it." Olivia smiled, a little embarrassed. "Thank you. Sometimes it's hard, especially when I'm exhausted after a long shift and still have to study, but I know it will be worth it in the end." Jack was about to respond when he noticed Mark Thompson entering the cafeteria. The general manager looked worried and stressed, very different from his usual cool composure. Mark looked around the cafeteria, his eyes briefly stopping on Jack and Olivia before continuing his search. "Are you okay?" Olivia asked, noticing the change in Jack's expression. Yes, I'm fine," Jack replied, turning his attention back to Olivia. "I just remembered that I have to finish fixing an air conditioner before my shift ends." Olivia looked at her watch and sighed. "Speaking of shifts, mine is about to start again. Thanks for the coffee and the chat, Jack." It's been nice to have a conversation that doesn't involve taking drink orders. They both stood up, and for a moment there was an awkward silence. Then Olivia gave Jack a quick hug. "See you around," she said with a smile before hurriedly leaving the cafeteria. Jack stood there for a moment, a goofy smile on his face. But when he saw Mark leave the cafeteria with a frustrated expression, his smile faded. He remembered the conversation he had witnessed earlier and wondered what was really going on in the resort his father had built. With a sigh, Jack threw away his empty coffee cup and prepared to return to work. He had a feeling that the coming months were going to be much more complicated than he had imagined. As the weeks passed, Jack became more and more adapted to his new life as a maintenance employee. His hands, once soft and well cared for, were now full of calluses and small cuts, a testament to the hard work he performed day after day. His skin, once pale from hours spent in air-conditioned offices, was now tanned by the Caribbean sun. But the changes weren't just physical. Jack began to notice how his perspective on the resort and its employees was gradually changing. He no longer saw Blue Paradise simply as a source of income or a family legacy, but as a living organism maintained by the effort and dedication of hundreds of people. One afternoon, while repairing an ice machine in the main kitchen, Jack overheard a conversation between two cooks that caught his attention. "I'm telling you, something weird is going on," one of them was saying in a low voice. "The supply orders have changed. We're receiving lower quality ingredients, but the prices on the menu are still the same." "Shh," the other replied, looking nervously around. "You shouldn't talk about that. You know what happened to Miguel when he started asking questions." Jack pretended to be concentrating on the ice machine, but his mind was quickly processing this new information. Were they lowering the quality of the ingredients? And what had happened to Miguel? Before he could hear more, Emily entered the kitchen. The cooks immediately changed the subject, talking loudly about the day's menu. Emily looked around the kitchen until her eyes landed on Jack. Jack," she said quickly, correcting herself. "Could you come with me for a moment? I need your help with something." Jack nodded, wiping his hands on his uniform before following Emily out of the kitchen. She led him to a deserted hallway before speaking. "How are you handling everything?" she asked in a low voice, concern evident on her face. "I'm fine," Jack replied, surprised by the question. "It's different, but I'm learning a lot." Emily nodded, but her expression remained serious. "Listen, Jack, I know you've probably noticed unusual things happening at the resort." Jack tensed. Did Emily know what he had heard in the kitchen? "I just want you to know," Emily continued, "that your father trusted me. He asked me to watch over you, to help you if you needed it. If you see or hear anything that worries you, you can come to me. Do you understand?" Jack nodded slowly, processing Emily's words. "Thank you," he finally said. "I'll keep that in mind." Emily gave him a small smile before walking away, leaving Jack with more questions than answers. That night, as he prepared to sleep in the small room he shared with two other maintenance employees, Jack couldn't stop thinking about everything he had discovered. The lower quality ingredients, Mark's suspicious conversation he had witnessed, Emily's cryptic words. He realized that Blue Paradise hid more secrets than he had imagined, and he, as Jack, was in a unique position to uncover them. As he fell asleep, Jack made a decision. He wasn't just going to work hard and learn about the resort's operations. He was going to investigate to discover what was really going on in his father's legacy. What he didn't know was that this decision would lead him down a path full of dangers, secrets, and perhaps even love. Jason, Blackwood's real challenge was about to begin. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when Jack was already up, preparing for another day of work at Blue Paradise Resort. Almost 2 months had passed since he began his new life as a maintenance employee, and each day brought new challenges and discoveries. As he put on his uniform, Jack mentally reviewed his plan for the day. In addition to his usual tasks, he was determined to investigate further the irregularities he had noticed at the resort. Emily's words still echoed in his mind. "If you see or hear anything that worries you, you can come to me." But Jack wasn't sure if he could fully trust her or anyone else. As he left the room he shared with other employees, he ran into Olivia in the hallway. She smiled at him, and Jack felt his heart skip a beat. "Good morning, early bird," Olivia greeted him. "Ready for another day in paradise?" Jack laughed. "As ready as one can be to clean pools and fix air conditioners. How about you, ready to serve mimosas to grumpy tourists?" Olivia made a comic grimace. "Oh, I can't wait, especially since I have an exam after my shift today. Nothing like studying advanced accounting with the smell of sunscreen, right?" "Hey, you're doing great," Jack said, his tone turning more serious. "I really admire your dedication." "Olivia, seriously." For a moment they both stood in silence, looking into each other's eyes. Jack felt the urge to say something more, to express the feelings that had been growing inside him over the past few weeks. But before he could do so, the walkie-talkie on his belt came to life. "Jack, we need you in the presidential suite. There's a problem with the jacuzzi," Martin's voice resonated. Jack sighed. "Duty calls, good luck on your exam. Olivia, I'm sure you'll do great." "Thanks, Jack," she replied with a smile. "Be careful with that jacuzzi. You don't want to end up looking like a wrinkled prune." With one last shared laugh, they both separated to begin their respective workdays. The presidential suite was a world apart from the rest of the resort. As he walked through the luxuriously decorated hallways, Jack couldn't help but feel a pang of nostalgia for his old life. Just a few weeks ago, he would have been the guest in a suite like this, not the maintenance man called to fix the jacuzzi. As he entered the suite, Jack was surprised to see Mark Thompson, the general manager, speaking in a low voice with a man he didn't recognize. The stranger was tall and thin, with an impeccable suit that screamed, "Old money." When they noticed Jack's presence, both men abruptly fell silent. "Ah, the maintenance staff," Mark said, with a condescending tone that made Jack have to suppress a grimace. "The jacuzzi isn't working properly. Fix it quickly and quietly. We don't want to disturb our distinguished guest." The man in the suit looked at Jack with a mixture of disdain and boredom before turning back to Mark. "Make sure this is resolved quickly, Thompson, and remember our conversation. Things must proceed as planned." With those cryptic words, the man left the suite, leaving Jack and Mark alone. For a moment, Mark seemed to forget Jack's presence, his face a mask of worry and calculation. Then, as if putting on a mask, his expression returned to its usual professional coldness. "Well?" Mark snapped. "What are you waiting for? Fix the jacuzzi and get out of here." Jack nodded silently and headed to the main bathroom. As he worked on the jacuzzi, his mind was racing. Who was that man? And what was it that needed to proceed as planned? Each day seemed to bring more questions than answers. After an hour of work, Jack managed to repair the jacuzzi. When he came out of the bathroom, he was surprised to find the suite empty Mark had left, probably to attend to other resort matters. But something caught Jack's attention, a manila envelope that slightly protruded from the edge of a partially open drawer in the desk. Jack knew he shouldn't snoop. It was an invasion of privacy, and if he was caught it could cost him his job and ruin the entire operation. But curiosity and the need to understand what was happening at his father's resort was stronger. With his heart beating rapidly, Jack approached the desk and pulled out the envelope. He carefully opened it and extracted several documents. They were contracts and financial statements, filled with numbers and legal terms he didn't fully understand. But even with his limited knowledge, he could see that something didn't add up. There were discrepancies in the numbers, transfers to offshore accounts, and mentions of special investments that didn't seem to have anything to do with the normal operation of the resort. Suddenly, Jack heard voices approaching in the hallway. In panic, he stuffed the documents back into the envelope and placed it in the drawer, trying to leave it exactly as he had found it. Then he grabbed his toolbox and quickly left the suite, passing by a group of guests who were just entering as he was leaving. With his heart still racing, Jack headed towards the maintenance rooms. He needed a moment to process what he had just seen. It was clear that something shady was happening at Blue Paradise, something that went beyond simple cuts in ingredient quality or changes in vendor contracts. As he walked, absorbed in his thoughts, he almost bumped into Emily, who was coming from the opposite direction. "Jack," she said, surprised. "I was looking for you. Do you have a moment?" Jack nodded, trying to hide his agitation. Emily led him to a small empty office and closed the door behind them. "Is everything okay?" Emily asked, her voice full of concern. "You seem upset." For a moment, Jack considered telling Emily everything he had seen and heard, but something held him back. Although Emily had been a trusted figure in his life for years, he wasn't sure who he could really trust. "Now, I'm fine," Jack lied. "Just a little tired. The jacuzzi in the presidential suite gave more problems than I expected." Emily looked at him intently for a moment as if she could see through his lie. Then she sighed. "Jack, I know things have been difficult for you these past few months, and I know you've been noticing unusual things at the resort." Emily paused as if carefully choosing her next words. "I just want you to know that I'm here for you. If you need to talk, or if you discover something that worries you, you can come to me. Your father trusted me, and I hope you can too." Jack felt a pang of guilt for not fully trusting Emily, but his instinct told him to be cautious. "Thank you, Emily," he finally said. "I appreciate it, and if there's anything I need to discuss, I'll let you know." Emily nodded, although Jack could see a hint of disappointment in her eyes. "Good. Just be careful, okay? And remember, you're not alone in this." With those cryptic words, Emily left the office, leaving Jack with even more questions than before. The rest of the day passed in a haze for Jack. He performed his tasks automatically, his mind constantly returning to the documents he had seen in the presidential suite and Emily's words. He knew he was on the verge of discovering something big, something that could change everything he thought he knew about his father's resort and the people around him. That night, as he prepared for bed, Jack made a decision. He couldn't continue being a passive observer. He needed to investigate further, to uncover the truth behind Blue Paradise's secrets. But he also knew he would have to be cautious. If there really was a conspiracy underway, any misstep could be dangerous. As he fell asleep, the image of Olivia appeared in his mind. He wondered what she would think if she knew the truth about who he really was. Would she see him differently? Would she understand why he had kept his true identity a secret? With these thoughts swirling in his head, Jack drifted into an uneasy sleep, unaware that the coming days would test not only his determination, but also his growing relationship with Olivia. The next morning, Jack woke up with a new resolution. He was going to get to the bottom of what was happening at Blue Paradise, no matter the risks. But he knew he would need help, someone he could trust, completely. As he performed his morning tasks, Jack kept a watchful eye out for Olivia. He found her during the lunch break, sitting alone at a table in the staff cafeteria, her nose buried in an accounting book. "Mind if I join you?" Jack asked, tray in hand. Olivia looked up and smiled, that warm gesture that always made Jack's heart skip a beat. "Of course not. It's always a pleasure to have company that doesn't ask me to explain the difference between debit and credit." Jack laughed as he sat down. "Well, I can't promise I won't ask you that at some point. My knowledge of accounting is pretty limited." "Oh, come on," Olivia teased. "I'm sure a smart guy like you could learn it quickly if you wanted to." For a moment, Jack considered telling Olivia everything right then and there, but he knew it wasn't the right place or time. Instead, he decided to test the waters. "Olivia," he began, lowering his voice, "have you noticed anything strange lately at the resort? Anything that seemed out of place?" Olivia's smile faded, replaced by a concerned expression. "Why do you ask?" she responded, also lowering her voice. Jack looked around to make sure no one was listening to them. "I've heard some things, seen some others. I think something's not right here, but I'm not sure what." Olivia seemed to hesitate for a moment before leaning in closer. "Now that you mention it, I've noticed some discrepancies in the financial records I've been studying for my advanced accounting class. At first I thought it was a mistake on my part, but the more I look at it, the more convinced I am that something doesn't add up." Jack's heart was racing. Here it was, the confirmation he needed that he wasn't imagining things. "Olivia," Jack said, his voice barely a whisper, "I think we need to talk more about this, but not here. Could we meet after work? Somewhere private?" Olivia looked at him intently for a moment, as if assessing whether she could trust him. Finally, she nodded. "There's a small cove south of the main beach. Almost no one goes there. We can meet there at sunset." Perfect, Jack said, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. I'll see you there. Just at that moment, Mark Thompson entered the cafeteria. His sharp gaze briefly rested on Jack and Olivia before he headed to the service line. Jack and Olivia exchanged a significant look before returning to their lunches and trivial conversations. But they both knew that tonight, in that lonely cove, everything could change. The rest of the day passed in a haze of anticipation for Jack. He performed his tasks mechanically, his mind occupied with what he might discover that night. When sunset finally arrived, he slipped away from the resort and headed towards the cove Olivia had mentioned. He found her, there, sitting on a rock looking out at the sea. The setting sunlight bathed her face in golden tones, and for a moment, Jack was left breathless at her beauty. "Olivia," he called softly as he approached. She turned and smiled at him, although Jack could see the tension in her eyes. "Jack, I'm glad you came." Jack sat down next to her on the rock, their shoulders almost touching. For a moment, they both remained silent, watching the waves break against the shore. "So," Olivia finally said, "what's really going on, Jack? Because I have a feeling you know more than you're letting on." Jack took a deep breath. This was the moment he knew that once he started talking, there would be no turning back. "Olivia," he began, turning to look directly into her eyes, "before I tell you anything else, I need you to know that I trust you. What I'm about to tell you, it could change everything, and I need to know that I can count on you." Olivia looked at him intently, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Jack, you're scaring me a little, but yes, you can trust me. Whatever is going on, I'm here to help." Jack took a deep breath. It was now or never. "My name isn't Jack," he finally said. "I'm Jason Blackwood, son of William Blackwood, the owner of the resort." Olivia's jaw dropped, her eyes widening in surprise and disbelief. "What? But how? Why?" Jason proceeded to tell her everything. His father's death, the will, the condition of working 6 months at the resort under a false identity. As he spoke, he saw a series of emotions pass across Olivia's face: surprise, confusion, and finally, understanding. "So, all this time," Olivia murmured when Jason finished his explanation. "I'm sorry for deceiving you," Jason said sincerely. "It was never my intention to hurt anyone, especially you, but I needed to maintain my cover." Olivia remained silent for a moment, processing all the information. Finally, she looked at Jason with a new determination in her eyes. "Okay, Jack." "No, Jason," she said, correcting herself. "I understand why you did it, and now I understand why you were so interested in the resort's irregularities. What have you discovered?" Jason felt a wave of relief at seeing that Olivia wasn't rejecting him. He told her about the documents he had seen in the presidential suite, the suspicious conversations he had overheard, and his suspicions about Mark Thompson. "I think someone is diverting funds from the resort," Jason concluded, "and I suspect Mark is involved somehow, but I need concrete evidence before I can do anything about it." Olivia nodded, her accountant's mind already working on the implications. "The discrepancies I noticed in the financial records, it all makes sense now, Jason. I think I can help you track the money trail. If we work together, we could uncover what's really going on." Jason felt a surge of gratitude and affection towards Olivia. "You'd do that, I know it's asking a lot and it could be dangerous." "Of course I'll do it," Olivia interrupted firmly. "This resort provides jobs for hundreds of people. If someone is stealing or doing something illegal, we need to stop them. Besides," she added with a small smile, "I've always wanted to be a kind of accounting detective." Jason couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. "Thank you, Olivia. You don't know how much your support means to me." For a moment they looked into each other's eyes, and Jason felt something change between them. He was no longer just Jack, the maintenance guy, but Jason Blackwood, with all the weight and responsibility that entailed. But in Olivia's eyes he saw that it didn't matter. She saw him for who he really was. Just when it seemed the moment might lead to something more, a noise in the nearby bushes startled them. They both jumped to their feet, looking around in alarm. "What was that?" Olivia whispered. "I don't know," Jason responded quietly. "But I think we'd better leave. We can't risk someone having followed us." Quickly, they left the cove and returned to the resort by separate paths, agreeing to meet the next day to begin their investigation in earnest. That night, as Jason prepared to sleep in his small employee room, his mind was spinning with everything that had happened. He had revealed his true identity to Olivia, and she had not only accepted him, but had offered to help him. He felt a mixture of excitement and fear about what would come next, but there was also a new concern. Had the noise in the bushes been just an animal, or had someone been spying on them? The idea that his secret might have been discovered filled him with unease. As he fell asleep, Jason couldn't know that the events of the following day would test not only his determination, but also his growing relationship with Olivia. The next morning dawned cloudy, as if the sky reflected the tension Jason felt. He quickly dressed in his maintenance uniform, more aware than ever of his role as Jack. Every interaction, every look, now seemed charged with new meaning. During breakfast in the staff cafeteria, Jason looked for Olivia. He found her sitting with a group of waitresses, laughing and chatting as if nothing had changed. But when their eyes briefly met, Jason could see the complicity in her gaze. They now shared a secret, a bond that went beyond their roles at the resort. Just as Jason was about to approach Olivia to arrange a time to meet, Mark Thompson entered the cafeteria. The general manager seemed tenser than usual, his eyes scanning the room as if looking for something or someone. Mark's gaze fell on Jason, and for a moment he seemed to study him with unsettling intensity. Jason felt his heart rate quicken. Did Mark suspect something? Before he could think more about it, Martin, the head of maintenance, approached Jason. "Jack, I need you to come with me," Martin said, his tone unusually serious. "Mr. Thompson wants to see you in his office." Now, Jason felt a knot form in his stomach. Why would Mark want to see him? Had he discovered his true identity? As he followed Martin out of the cafeteria, Jason cast one last glance at Olivia. She was watching him with concern, and Jason had to resist the urge to run to her and tell her what was happening. The walk to Mark's office seemed endless. Jason mentally reviewed every interaction he had had in the past few days, trying to remember if he had made any mistake that could have revealed his secret. Finally, they reached the imposing door of Mark's office. Martin knocked, and after hearing a brief "come in" from inside, opened the door. "Here's Jack, Mr. Thompson," Martin said. "Thank you, Martin." "You may go," Mark responded, without looking up from the papers on his desk. Martin nodded and left, closing the door behind him and leaving Jason alone with Mark. For a moment, silence filled the room. Mark continued reviewing his papers as if Jason wasn't there. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Mark looked up. "Jack," he said, his voice cold and calculating. "I've been watching you." Jason felt his heart stop for a moment. He tried to maintain a neutral expression as he responded, "Sir?" Mark leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on Jason. "You've been doing a good job, efficient, discreet. The kind of employee we value here at Blue Paradise." Jason felt a mixture of relief and confusion. Was this really just about his job performance? "Thank you, sir," Jason responded, trying to sound grateful but not too excited. "However," Mark continued, his tone becoming sharper, "I've also noticed that you seem to have an unusual curiosity about matters that are outside your area of responsibility." The relief Jason had felt evaporated instantly. Mark was watching him, and not just his work. "I don't know what you mean, sir," Jason said, struggling to remain calm. Mark leaned forward, his eyes never leaving Jason's. "Let me be clear. Jack Blue Paradise is like a big family. And in a family, each member has their place and their responsibilities. We don't like it when someone steps out of their place." The implicit threat in Mark's words was clear. Jason felt a chill run down his spine, but he stood firm. "I understand, sir," he responded. "I'm just here to do my job as best I can." Mark studied him for a moment longer before nodding slowly. "Good. I'm glad we understand each other. You may go." Jason left the office with shaky legs. It was clear that Mark suspected something, although maybe he didn't know exactly what the situation was becoming, more dangerous than he had anticipated. As he walked back to his duties, Jason saw Olivia in the hallway. She looked at him with concern, clearly wanting to know what had happened. Jason subtly shook his head, indicating it wasn't safe to talk there. Later that day, during their break, Jason managed to meet with Olivia in a quiet corner of the resort gardens. "What happened?" Olivia asked in a low voice, concern evident in her voice. "Does Mark suspect something?" Jason quickly told her about the strange conversation in Mark's office. "I don't think he knows who I really am," he concluded, "but he definitely suspects I'm investigating something." Olivia frowned. "This is dangerous, Jason. Maybe we should stop." "No," Jason interrupted firmly. "We can't stop now. If Mark is involved in something illegal, we need to uncover it for the sake of the resort, for my father's legacy." Olivia looked at him for a moment before slowly nodding. "You're right, but we have to be more careful. We can't let Mark catch us." "Agreed," said Jason. "We need to accelerate our investigation. Olivia, do you think you could access more financial records? We need concrete evidence." "I can try," Olivia responded. "There are some files in the accounting office that could be useful, but it won't be easy to access them without raising suspicions." "Let me think of a plan," said Jason. "In the meantime, act normal. We don't want Mark to suspect you too." Just as they were about to separate, Jason took Olivia's hand. "Be careful, okay? If anything happened to you because of me, Olivia gave him a comforting squeeze. "I'll be fine. We're in this together, remember?" With one last look of complicity, they separated and returned to their respective jobs. That night, as Jason lay in his bed, his mind was spinning with plans and worries. The conversation with Mark had shaken him more than he wanted to. Admit he knew they were playing a dangerous game, but he also knew he couldn't stop now. As he fell asleep, Jason couldn't know that the events of the following day would test not only his courage, but also his growing relationship with Olivia. The mystery of Blue Paradise was about to become much more complicated and dangerous. The next morning dawned with a palpable tension in the air at Blue Paradise Resort. Jason, still under his identity as Jack, woke up before dawn, his mind already working on the details of the plan he had been elaborating during the night. As he dressed in his maintenance uniform, he mentally reviewed each step. He knew that what he was about to do was risky, but he also knew he had no other choice if he wanted to uncover the truth about what was happening at his father's resort. As he left his room, he came face to face with Robert, the head accountant. The man seemed nervous, his eyes moving quickly from one side of the hallway to the other. "Good morning, Robert," Jason greeted, trying to maintain a casual tone. Robert started, as if he hadn't noticed Jason's presence until that moment. "Oh, good morning, Jack, right?" Jason nodded, noticing the sweat beading on Robert's forehead. "Are you all right? You seem a bit agitated." "Me? No, I'm fine," Robert quickly responded, his voice a little higher than normal. "Just a lot of work. You know, the numbers don't add up by themselves." With a nervous laugh, Robert quickly walked away, leaving Jason with a sense of unease. This brief interaction only reinforced Jason's conviction that something was definitely wrong at Blue Paradise. With renewed determination, he headed towards the staff cafeteria for his breakfast and to set in motion the first phase of his plan. In the cafeteria, Jason looked for Olivia. He found her sitting alone at a table in the corner, apparently absorbed in an accounting book. But when Jason approached, he could see the tension in her shoulders and the way her eyes weren't moving across the page. "Good morning," Jason said quietly as he sat across from her. Olivia looked up, a small smile forming on her lips as she saw Jason. "Good morning, Jason," she responded, quickly correcting herself and lowering her voice even more. "Are you ready?" Jason asked, his voice barely audible over the murmur of conversations around them. Olivia nodded, closing her book. "As ready as I can be to commit a possible corporate crime," she responded with a nervous laugh. Jason extended his hand across the table, briefly covering Olivia's. "Remember, if at any point you feel it's too risky, you can back out. I don't want to put you in danger." Olivia's eyes softened at the gesture. "We're in this together, Jason. I'm not going to back down now. Just... At that moment, Mark Thompson entered the cafeteria, his sharp gaze sweeping the room before landing on Jason and Olivia. For a moment, Jason feared Mark would approach them, but the general manager simply narrowed his eyes before heading to the service line. "It's time," Jason murmured. "Remember, the plan, I'll create a distraction in the east wing of the resort that should keep most of the security staff busy. You'll have approximately 15 minutes to enter the accounting office and obtain the files we need." Olivia nodded, her expression a mixture of determination and nervousness. "Be careful, Jason, and good luck." With one last look of complicity, they both stood up and headed to their respective positions, aware that the next few minutes could change everything. Jason headed towards the east wing of the resort, his heart pounding hard in his chest. He knew that what he was about to do would put his cover at risk, but it was a risk he was willing to take. When he reached the main hallway of the east wing, Jason took a deep breath and prepared himself. Then, with a quick movement, he activated the fire alarm. The effect was immediate. Sirens began to sound throughout the resort, and within seconds the hallway was filled with confused guests and rushed staff. Jason began directing people towards the emergency exits, perfectly playing his role as a responsible employee. "Please remain calm and head to the exits," Jason shouted over the noise of the alarms. "It's just a precaution, but we need everyone to evacuate the building." As chaos unfolded around him, Jason couldn't help but think of Olivia. He hoped the distraction would be enough to give her the time she needed to access the accounting files. At the other end of the resort, Olivia took advantage of the confusion to slip into the accounting office. With trembling hands, she began searching through the file cabinets, aware that every second counted. Come on," she muttered to herself as she quickly flipped through the documents. "It has to be here somewhere." Finally, her eyes fell on a folder labeled Special Investments. With her heart pounding, Olivia opened the folder and began scanning its contents. What she saw left her breathless. There were records of transfers to offshore accounts, falsified invoices, and what appeared to be bribes disguised as consulting expenses. It was worse than she and Jason had imagined. Quickly, Olivia took out her phone and began taking photos of the most incriminating documents. She was so focused on her task that she didn't hear the door open behind her. Well, what do we have here?" Olivia froze, fear running down her spine like an ice cube. Slowly, she turned around to find herself face to face with Mark Thompson. The general manager was standing in the doorway, a cold smile on his face. "Olivia, dear, I didn't expect to find you here, especially during an emergency evacuation." Olivia tried to stay calm, her mind working frantically to find a plausible excuse. "Mr. Thompson, I was looking for some files I needed for my accounting class. With all the confusion, I thought it would be a good time to..." "Save the excuses," Mark interrupted, his voice sharp as a knife. "We both know that's not true. The question is, what am I going to do with you now?" Olivia's fear transformed into determination. She wasn't going to let Mark intimidate her. "What's happening here is illegal, Mr. Thompson. You can't get away with it." Mark laughed, a humorless sound that made Olivia shudder. "Oh, my dear Olivia, you have no idea what you're getting into. This goes far beyond you, me, even the resort." He took a step forward, his expression becoming threatening. "Now, you're going to give me that phone and we're going to have a long conversation about your future. At this resort and maybe about your future in general." Olivia stepped back, her back hitting the file cabinet. She was trapped, and she knew it. But just when she thought all was lost, a familiar voice resonated from the hallway. "Olivia, are you in here? We need to evacuate." It was Jason. Olivia had never been so happy to hear his voice. Mark cursed under his breath. "This isn't over," he hissed before turning around and quickly leaving the office just as Jason appeared in the doorway. "Olivia, what?" Jason began, but he stopped short when he saw the panicked expression on Olivia's face. "What happened?" "Mark," Olivia managed to say, her voice shaky. "He caught me, Jason. He knows we're investigating. We have to get out of here now." Without wasting a second, Jason took Olivia's hand and led her out of the office. Together, they ran through the resort's hallways, blending in with the last groups of people evacuating the building. Once outside, in the relative safety of the resort gardens, Jason took Olivia to a secluded corner, away from prying ears. "Are you okay?" he asked, his eyes scanning Olivia's face for signs of injury. Olivia nodded, still shaking slightly. "I'm okay, scared but okay." Then, with trembling hands, she took out her phone. "Jason, I got it. I have evidence of what's going on. It's worse than we thought." Jason took the phone and began reviewing the photos Olivia had taken. With each image, his expression became grimmer. "This is incredible," he murmured. "Fun diversion, bribes Olivia. This could destroy everything my father worked for." "I know," Olivia responded quietly. "What are we going to do now?" Jason looked up, his gaze meeting Olivia's. At that moment, they both realized that there was no turning back. They were fully involved in something much bigger and more dangerous than they had imagined. "We need to talk to Emily," Jason finally said. "She said my father trusted her. Maybe she can help us understand what's really going on here." Olivia nodded, but before she could respond, they noticed Mark Thompson walking towards them, his expression a mask of barely contained fury. "We have to go," Jason whispered urgently. "Now." Hand in hand, Jason, and Olivia slipped away among the crowd of confused guests and employees, aware that each step was taking them deeper into a mystery that threatened to change everything. As they ran, Jason couldn't help but think about how everything had changed in such a short time. He had arrived at the resort, thinking his biggest challenge would be learning to work as a common employee. Now, he found himself in the middle of a conspiracy that threatened not only his inheritance, but possibly also his life and Olivia's. The night had fallen over Blue Paradise Resort, enveloping the place in a cloak of darkness that seemed to reflect the growing tension in the air. Jason and Olivia, still shaken by the day's events, found themselves hidden in a small maintenance shed on the outskirts of the resort, trying to process everything that had happened and decide their next move. "I can't believe Mark caught us," Olivia whispered, her voice still trembling from the adrenaline. "Do you think he suspects who you really are?" Jason shook his head, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "I don't think so. If he knew I was Jason Blackwood, he would have made his move much earlier, but now he knows we're investigating, and that puts us in danger." Olivia nodded, taking out her phone to review once more the photos she had taken of the incriminating documents. "Jason, this is big. We're talking about millions of dollars diverted, falsified contracts, possible connections to organized crime." Her voice broke on the last part, the magnitude of what they had discovered finally hitting her with full force. Jason moved closer to her, putting a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I know, it's overwhelming, but now we have evidence. We can do something about it." "But what?" Olivia asked, looking at him with a mixture of fear and determination in her eyes. "We can't just go to the police if Mark is involved. Who knows how many more people are? We could be putting our lives in danger." Jason remained silent for a moment, considering their options. Finally, he made a decision. "We have to talk to Emily. My father trusted her, and right now, she's the only person I think we can trust." Olivia nodded slowly. "Okay, but how are we going to get to her without Mark seeing us? He probably has all the security staff looking for us." "I have an idea," said Jason, a spark of his old confidence shining in his eyes. "But it's going to require us to trust each other completely. Are you willing to take the risk with me, Olivia?" Olivia looked at him intently for a moment, and Jason could see the internal struggle in her eyes. Finally, she took his hand and squeezed it firmly. "I'm with you, Jason, to the end." With a plan in mind, Jason and Olivia stealthily left the maintenance shed. The night covered them, but every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat. They moved quickly and silently through the resort's gardens, avoiding lit areas and main paths. They reached the back of the main building, where they knew Emily's office was located. Jason pointed to a window on the second floor. "That's the window to her office," he whispered. "I'm going to climb up and try to get in. You stay here and keep watch. If you see anyone approaching, whistle like a tropical bird, okay?" Olivia nodded, though worry was evident on her face. "Be careful, Jason." Jason gave her a reassuring smile before he began climbing up the vine that covered the building's wall. Every movement was calculated, aware that a misstep could not only expose them, but also result in a dangerous fall. Finally, he reached Emily's window. To his surprise and relief, it was slightly ajar. Carefully, Jason opened it further and slipped inside the office. The room was dark, illuminated only by the faint moonlight filtering through the window. Jason took out his phone to use as a flashlight, looking for any sign of Emily. "Emily!" he called softly. "Are you here?" Suddenly, a lamp turned on in the corner of the office, revealing Emily sitting in an armchair, a calm expression on her face that contrasted strongly with the situation. "I was expecting you, Jason," Emily said, her voice quiet but with a touch of sadness. "I knew you would eventually discover the truth and come to me." Jason froze, surprised not only by Emily's presence but by her words. "You knew? You knew what was happening at the resort?" Emily nodded slowly. "Yes, I knew, and there's much more you need to know." She stood up and approached Jason, her eyes full of a mixture of affection and regret. "But first, we need to bring Olivia here. It's not safe for her to be alone outside." Jason, still stunned by this revelation, nodded mechanically and went to the window to signal Olivia. In a matter of minutes, she too was in the office, looking with confusion between Jason and Emily. "Sit down, both of you," Emily said, pointing to a sofa. "We have a lot to talk about, and time is not on our side." Jason and Olivia sat down, their hands instinctively finding each other, seeking comfort in each other's touch. Emily looked at them for a moment, a sad expression crossing her face. "What you're about to hear will change everything you think you know about Blue Paradise and William Blackwood. Are you prepared for that?" Jason and Olivia exchanged a look. Before nodding, Emily took a deep breath and began her story. "Blue Paradise wasn't always the luxurious resort it is today," Emily began. "Many years ago, when your father acquired it, Jason, it was little more than a run-down motel on a forgotten beach. But William saw the potential, not just for a successful business, but for something more." Emily paused, as if searching for the right words. "Your father was a man with a vision, Jason. He wanted to create not just a resort, but a real paradise, a place where people could escape their problems and find peace. But to do that, he needed money. A lot of money." Jason felt his heart rate quicken. He had the feeling he was about to discover something that would forever change the image he had of his father. "That's when William made a deal," Emily continued. "A deal with powerful and dangerous people, people who could provide the money he needed, but who also demanded something in return." "What kind of people?" Olivia asked, her voice barely a whisper. Emily looked at her with a grave expression. "The kind of people you don't want to be indebted to. Let's call them unconventional investors." Jason felt a knot form in his stomach. "Are you saying my father did business with criminals?" Emily nodded slowly. "Your father believed he was doing the right thing, Jason. He thought he could use that money to create something beautiful, something that would benefit many people. And in many ways, he succeeded. Blue Paradise has provided employment to hundreds of people, boosted the local economy, brought joy to thousands of tourists. But the cost, the fund diversions, the falsified contracts," Olivia interrupted. "All of that was to pay these investors, wasn't it?" "Yes," Emily confirmed. "William managed to maintain a delicate balance for years. He used part of the resort's profits to pay the investors, while reinvesting the rest in improving the place and in community projects. But lately things were becoming more complicated." "What do you mean?" Jason asked, dreading the answer. Emily sighed deeply. The investors wanted more. They threatened to expose everything. If William didn't increase the payments, your father was under immense pressure, Jason. I believe that may have contributed to his heart attack." Jason stood up abruptly, unable to contain his agitation. "I can't believe it. My father, how could he do something like this? How could he risk everything he worked for? How could he put us all in danger?" Olivia stood up and put a hand on his arm, trying to calm him. "Jason, your father thought he was doing the right thing. Maybe not in the right way, but his intentions, Intentions don't matter when you're dealing with criminals, Jason snapped, though he immediately regretted his tone when he saw the hurt expression on Olivia's face. Emily approached them, her expression serious. Jason, I understand your anger and disappointment, but now is not the time for that. We're in a very dangerous situation. With your father's death, the investors are getting impatient. Mark has been trying to keep them at bay, but he's reaching his limit. Wait, Olivia said, her eyes widening with understanding. Is Mark trying to protect the resort? Emily nodded. In his own way. Yes, I don't approve of his methods, but he's been doing everything he can to maintain the balance your father established, Jason. However, now that you've discovered the truth, things have become even more complicated. Jason passed a hand over his face, trying to process all this information. What are we supposed to do now? We can't just ignore all this. Emily looked at both of them with a determined expression. No, we can't ignore it, but we can't face it alone either. We need help, Jason. And I think I know where we can find it. Where? Jason and Olivia asked in unison. Emily went to her desk and pulled out a sealed envelope from the top drawer. Your father left this for you, Jason. He said I should only give it to you if you ever discovered the truth about Blue Paradise. With trembling hands, Jason took the envelope. He opened it slowly, pulling out a handwritten letter as he read. His expression changed from confusion to amazement, and finally, to firm resolution. What does it say? Olivia asked softly. Jason looked up from the letter, his eyes shining with a new determination. My father had a contingency, plan A way to free himself from the investors once and for all, but he needed me to be ready to carry it out. And are you? Emily asked, her voice full of hope and concern in equal measure. Jason looked at Olivia, then at Emily, and finally back at the letter in his hands. I don't know, he admitted, but I know I can't turn my back on this. Blue Paradise is more than just a resort. It's my father's legacy. It's the livelihood of hundreds of people. I can't let it fall into the hands of criminals. Olivia took his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. You're not alone in this. Jason, I'm with you, no matter what happens. Emily nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. And so am I. Your father trusted me to help you, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Jason felt a wave of gratitude towards these two women who were willing to risk everything for him and for Blue Paradise. He knew the road ahead would be dangerous and full of challenges, but for the first time since this whole madness began, he felt a spark of hope. Okay, he finally said, let's do it. Let's save Blue Paradise and honor my father's true legacy. As the first rays of dawn began to peek over the horizon, faintly illuminating Emily's office, the three began to plan their next move. They knew they were facing powerful and dangerous enemies, but they also knew they had something their adversaries didn't have, the truth and the determination to do the right thing. Blue Paradise was about to face its biggest storm, and Jason, Olivia, and Emily were at the center of it. But together, maybe, just maybe, they could not only survive the storm, but emerge stronger on the other side. The real test was just beginning, and the fate of Blue Paradise hung by a thread. The first rays of the sun filtered through the curtains of Emily's office, illuminating the tired but determined faces of Jason, Olivia, and Emily. They had spent the entire night planning, discussing and preparing for what was to come. William Blackwood's contingency plan was bold and risky, but it was their best hope for saving Blue Paradise. Let's go over the plan one more time, Jason said, his voice tired but firm. Olivia, you'll be in charge of compiling and organizing all the evidence we have about the illegal activities, Emily. You'll coordinate with the trustworthy employees to ensure the resort continues to function normally while we carry out our plan. Both women nodded, their expressions a mixture of nervousness and determination. And you, Jason? Olivia asked, concern evident in her voice. Jason took a deep breath before responding, I'll confront Mark and the investors. It's time they know who I really am and what I plan to do. Emily put a hand on Jason's shoulder. It's dangerous, Jason. These men will stop at nothing to protect their interests. I know, Jason responded, his gaze fixed on his father's letter. But my father believed I could do it, and I believe it too. Besides, I have something they don't expect. "What's that?" Emily and Olivia asked in unison. Jason smiled, a flash of his old confidence shining in his eyes, the truth and the determination to do the right thing, no matter the cost. With one last exchange of looks, the trio separated to set their plan in motion. Olivia headed to the accounting office, taking advantage of the residual chaos from the false fire alarm to access more documents without raising suspicions. Emily began moving around the resort, speaking quietly with key employees, preparing them for what was to come without revealing too much. Jason, for his part, headed straight for the presidential suite. He knew Mark would be there, probably trying to calm the investors after the events of the previous day. It was time to face the truth face to face. As he walked through the luxurious corridors of the resort, Jason felt as if he was seeing everything for the first time. Every detail, from the luxurious carpets to the elegant chandeliers, reminded him of his father's dream, a dream that had been corrupted by greed and fear, but a dream that could still be saved. Upon reaching the door of the presidential suite, Jason took a deep breath and knocked firmly. For a moment there was only silence, then the door opened, revealing a visibly surprised Mark Thompson. "Jack, what the hell are you doing here?" Mark snapped, his face a mask of irritation and confusion. Jason looked him straight in the eye, completely dropping his maintenance employee facade. "I think it's time we had a conversation, Mark. A very serious conversation." Before Mark could respond, a voice from inside the suite caught his attention. "Who is it, Thompson? We don't have time for interruptions." Jason recognized that voice. It was the man in the expensive suit he had seen talking to Mark days ago. Without waiting for an invitation, Jason pushed Mark aside and entered the suite. The man in the suit was sitting in a leather armchair, surrounded by two other intimidating-looking men. They all turned to look at Jason with a mixture of surprise and annoyance. "Gentlemen," Jason said, his voice firm and clear, "allow me to introduce myself properly. My name is Jason Blackwood, son of William Blackwood and rightful heir to Blue Paradise Resort." The silence that followed this statement was deafening. Mark seemed to have lost the ability to speak, while the other men exchanged looks of astonishment and growing anger. The man in the suit was the first to recover. He slowly stood up, his expression changing from surprise to a cold, calculating smile. "Well, well, young Mr. Blackwood in person. I must say it's a surprise and not a particularly pleasant one." Jason maintained his firm stance. "I know who you are and what you've been doing with my resort, and I've come to tell you it's over." A harsh laugh filled the room. "Over? Boy, you have no idea who you're dealing with. This resort is much more than you think, and it has much more powerful owners than you." "You're wrong," Jason responded, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "I have evidence of all your illegal activities, every transaction, every bribe, every threat. And if anything happens to me, that evidence will go directly to the authorities and the media." The face of the man in the suit darkened. "You're playing a very dangerous game, kid." "It's not a game," Jason replied. "It's my legacy and my father's, and I'm willing to fight for it." Just at that moment, the door of the suite burst open. Olivia and Emily entered, followed by a group of police officers. "The authorities are already here," Olivia announced, her voice trembling slightly, but her eyes shining with determination. "And they have all the evidence they need." Chaos broke out in the suite. The men tried to flee but were quickly subdued by the officers. Mark, pale and shaking, was handcuffed without offering resistance. Amidst the commotion, Jason approached Olivia and Emily. "We did it," he said, disbelief and relief evident in his voice. Olivia hugged him tightly. "You did it, Jason. You saved Blue Paradise." Emily, with tears in her eyes, put a hand on Jason's shoulder. "Your father would be so proud of you." As the officers took away the detainees, Jason looked out the suite window. The sun had fully risen, bathing the resort in a golden light. It was as if Blue Paradise itself was celebrating its liberation. The days and weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The news of what had happened at Blue Paradise spread quickly, causing a stir in the tourism industry, and beyond, Jason worked tirelessly to restore the resort's reputation, implementing new policies of transparency and business ethics. Olivia, impressed by his courage and determination during the crisis, accepted Jason's offer to become the resort's new head of accounting. Together, they formed a formidable team, combining Jason's vision with Olivia's sharp financial sense. Emily remained a key figure in the resort's administration, her experience and loyalty more valuable than ever under her guidance. The staff of Blue Paradise united like never before, working together to build a better future. A month after the dramatic events, Jason organized a big celebration at the resort. Employees, guests, and members of the local community gathered for what Jason called the Renaissance of Blue Paradise. Standing on a small stage in front of the beach with Olivia and Emily by his side, Jason addressed the crowd. Just over 6 months ago, I arrived at this resort as Jack, a simple maintenance employee. I thought I was coming to learn about the business, but in reality, I came to learn about life, integrity, and the true meaning of legacy. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the attentive faces in the audience. Blue Paradise was always more than just a business for my father. It was a dream, a vision of what could be, a place where people could find not just rest and fun, but also hope and opportunities. Today, we are reclaiming that dream. Jason took Olivia's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. With the help of incredible people like Olivia, Emily, and each one of you, we are building a new Blue Paradise, a place based on honesty, integrity, and mutual care. A true paradise not just for our guests, but for everyone who calls this place home. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Jason looked at Olivia, seeing in her eyes the same love and determination he felt in his heart. "I love you," he whispered, low enough for only her to hear. Olivia smiled, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. "I love you too," she responded. As the sun set over Blue Paradise, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Jason felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he also knew he wouldn't be alone with Olivia by his side. Emily's support, and the loyalty of his team, Jason was ready to face any challenge the future might bring. Blue Paradise had not only survived its greatest storm, but had emerged stronger and brighter than ever. And so, as the stars began to appear in the night sky, a new era began for Blue Paradise. An era of honesty, love, and true happiness. William Blackwood's dream lived on, stronger than ever, in the capable hands of his son and in the hearts of all those who called Blue Paradise their home. As the celebration continued into the night, Jason found a quiet moment to slip away from the crowds. He walked along the beach, the soft sand beneath his feet, and the gentle sound of waves creating a soothing atmosphere. He stopped at a spot where he and his father used to sit and watch the sunset when he was a child. "We did it, Dad," he whispered to the night air. "We saved your dream. I hope you're proud." He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Olivia standing beside him, her eyes full of understanding. "He would be so proud of you, Jason," she said softly. "You've honored his legacy in the best way possible." Jason pulled her close, wrapping an arm around her waist. "I couldn't have done it without you, Olivia. You've been my strength through all of this." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the moonlight dance on the waves. Then Jason turned to face Olivia, taking both her hands in his. "Olivia," he began, his voice filled with emotion, "these past months have been the most challenging yet most rewarding of my life. And through it all, you've been there, supporting me, challenging me, making me a better person. I can't imagine facing the future without you by my side." Olivia's eyes widened as Jason slowly lowered himself to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Olivia Thompson, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in life, in love, and in making Blue Paradise the best it can be?" Tears of joy sprang to Olivia's eyes as she nodded emphatically. "Yes, Jason, 1,000 times yes!" As Jason slipped the ring onto her finger, the sound of cheering erupted from behind them. They turned to see the entire staff of Blue Paradise, led by Emily, watching from a respectful distance. The couple laughed and waved, their hearts full of love and gratitude for their extended family. In the years that followed, Blue Paradise flourished under Jason and Olivia's leadership. They transformed the resort into a model of ethical business practices and community involvement. The resort became known not just for its luxury and beauty, but for its commitment to sustainability and social responsibility. Emily remained a crucial part of the team, serving as a mentor to both Jason and Olivia. Her wisdom and experience helped guide the resort through the challenges of growth and change. Jason and Olivia's wedding, held on the beach of Blue Paradise, was a celebration that brought together employees, guests, and the local community. It symbolized not just the union of two people, but the unity of purpose that had come to define the resort. As their family grew, with the arrival of two children, Jason and Olivia made sure to instill in them the values that had saved Blue Paradise: integrity, hard work, and a commitment to doing what's right, no matter the cost. Blue Paradise became more than just a successful resort. It became a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of redemption, and a living legacy of William Blackwood's original dream. Visitors came not just for the beautiful beaches and luxurious amenities, but for the warmth and authenticity that permeated every aspect of the resort. And on quiet evenings, when the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues, Jason would often find himself on that same spot on the beach, arm in arm with Olivia, watching their children play in the sand. In those moments, he felt a profound sense of peace and gratitude. He had not only saved his father's legacy, but had transformed it into something even greater. Blue Paradise was truly a paradise now, not just in name, but in spirit. And as he looked at his family, at the resort that had become a home to so many, Jason knew that this was just the beginning of a beautiful, endless journey. The story of Blue Paradise, of redemption, love, and the power of doing what's right would continue to inspire for generations to come, and in that, William Blackwood's dream lived on, brighter and more vibrant than ever before.